Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Marriage. Vincent Torres had always prided himself on reading people. 20 years in Army Special Forces had taught him to spot deception from a mile away, to sense when someone was lying before they even opened their mouth. Yet somehow, he'd missed the signs in his own home for 3 years. At 38, Vincent was a man who commanded respect without saying a word. His dark eyes held the kind of intensity that made grown men uncomfortable, and his 6'2" frame carried the disciplined posture of someone who'd never truly left the military behind. After his service, he'd built Torres Security Solutions from nothing into the most sought-after private security firm in the Southwest. Wealthy clients paid premium rates for his team's protection, knowing that Vincent's word was absolute and his loyalty unbreakable. Until someone broke theirs first. Lila Torres had been the perfect military wife during his service years. Beautiful, supportive, never complaining about the long deployments or the dangers of his missions. Her auburn hair and warm smile had been his anchor through the darkest operations, her letters the light that guided him home. When Ruby was born 8 years ago, Lila had seemed to transform into the ideal mother, doting on their daughter with a tenderness that melted even Vincent's hardened heart. But perfection, Vincent had learned, was often just another word for deception. The cracks had started small. Lila staying out later with her book club, mysterious phone calls that ended when he walked into the room, new clothes and jewelry she claimed were gifts from friends. Vincent's training screamed at him to investigate, but the part of him that loved his wife whispered that he was being paranoid. After all, hadn't he seen enough broken marriages in the military? Hadn't he promised himself he'd trust his wife completely? Ruby, their 8-year-old daughter, had inherited Vincent's observational skills and Lila's beauty. She was precocious in a way that sometimes unnerved adults, asking questions that cut straight to the heart of matters they preferred to avoid. Vincent adored her fierce intelligence, even when it made him uncomfortable. She was the one pure thing in his life, the one person whose loyalty he never questioned. The previous month had brought strange changes to their household routine. Lila had grown distant, distracted. She'd started talking about taking a solo vacation, claiming she needed time to find herself. Vincent had agreed, though every instinct screamed against it. He'd even helped her plan the trip to the remote cabin in Colorado, thinking that maybe space would help them reconnect when she returned. He should have known better. Vincent Torres didn't believe in coincidences, and he should have trusted that instinct when the State Patrol called him at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. "Mr. Torres, I'm sorry to inform you that your wife, Lila Torres, was involved in a single-vehicle accident on Highway 34 near Loveland Pass. The car went over the guardrail during the snowstorm. I'm afraid there were no survivors." The words had hit him like shrapnel, tearing through his chest and leaving him gasping. They'd found Lila's rental car at the bottom of a ravine, burned beyond recognition. Her purse, her ID, her wedding ring, all recovered from the wreckage. The body was too badly damaged for viewing, they'd said. DNA confirmation would take weeks, but the evidence was conclusive. Vincent had arranged everything with military precision. The funeral, the flowers, the reception. He'd held Ruby as she cried, had accepted condolences from friends and family, had played the part of the grieving widower perfectly. Inside, he'd felt nothing but a cold, hollow rage at the universe for taking away the one person he'd allowed himself to love completely. Now, standing in their bedroom 3 weeks later, Vincent stared at the framed photo on Lila's nightstand. It showed the three of them at Ruby's 7th birthday party, all smiles and laughter. But as he looked closer, he noticed something he'd missed before. The way Lila smiled didn't quite reach her eyes, the subtle distance in her posture, even as she held Ruby close. His phone buzzed with a text from his brother Miguel. "Funeral's tomorrow. You sure you're ready for this?" Vincent typed back, "Ready as I'll ever be." But as he set the phone down, his gaze fell on Ruby's iPad, lying on Lila's dresser. His daughter had been unusually quiet since the accident, spending hours on the device instead of playing with her toys. When he'd asked what she was doing, she'd simply said she was looking for Mommy. Children processed grief differently, the counselor had told him. Some became withdrawn, others acted out. Ruby's quiet obsession with the iPad seemed harmless enough, but something about her behavior nagged at Vincent's trained instincts. Tomorrow they would bury his wife. Tomorrow he would say goodbye to the woman he'd loved for 12 years. Tomorrow he would try to move forward with the wreckage of his life. But tonight, Vincent Torres had the strangest feeling that tomorrow would bring answers he wasn't prepared to hear. Chapter 2. The Accident That Wasn't. The morning of Lila's funeral dawned gray and bitter, matching Vincent's mood as he helped Ruby into her black dress. She'd been unusually compliant, none of her typical 8-year-old resistance to formal clothes. Instead, she'd clutched her small purse and phone with a determination that reminded Vincent uncomfortably of himself preparing for a mission. "Daddy," Ruby said as they drove to St. Mary's Cathedral, "what happens if someone isn't really dead?" Vincent's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Like in movies. Sometimes people pretend to be dead, but they're really alive. That's just make-believe, Ruby. In real life, when someone dies, they don't come back." Ruby was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window. But what if they were never really dead to begin with? The question sent ice through Vincent's veins, but he forced his voice to remain calm. "Why would you ask that?" "Just wondering." Vincent had learned to read between the lines of his daughter's carefully chosen words. Ruby never asked random questions. Every inquiry was purposeful, leading somewhere specific. But today wasn't the day to probe deeper. Today was about saying goodbye to the woman who'd been their anchor, their heart, their home. The cathedral was packed with mourners. Lila's friends from various social groups, neighbors, clients from Vincent's business who'd known her through company events. Vincent mechanically shook hands and accepted condolences, his mind cataloging faces out of habit. Military training died hard. Even in grief, he found himself noting who attended, who seemed genuinely upset, who appeared to be going through the motions. Derek Manning stood near the back, looking appropriately somber in his dark suit. Vincent knew him peripherally. Lila had mentioned him as a friend from her photography class at the community college. He was the type of man women found charming. Tall, athletic build going soft around the edges, easy smile, carefully styled blonde hair. The kind of man who looked good in photos and made effortless conversation at parties. Vincent had never liked him, though he'd never been able to articulate why. Derek's handshake was too firm, his eye contact too intense, his interest in Lila's photography too keen. But Lila had insisted he was just a friend, and Vincent had pushed his suspicions aside as post-military paranoia. Now, watching Derek's performance of grief, Vincent felt that familiar itch between his shoulder blades, the one that had kept him alive through 3 tours in Afghanistan. The service was everything Lila would have wanted. Beautiful flowers, heartfelt eulogies, her favorite hymns. Father Morrison spoke about love eternal and the comfort of knowing Lila was in a better place. Vincent held Ruby's hand throughout, feeling her small fingers grip his tightly whenever someone mentioned her mother. As they prepared to move to the cemetery for the burial, Ruby tugged on Vincent's sleeve. "Daddy, I need to tell you something." "What is it, sweetheart?" Ruby glanced around nervously, then pulled out her phone. "I've been doing research about Mommy's accident." Vincent's blood chilled. "Ruby, what kind of research?" "The kind you taught me. Remember when you showed me how to use the computer to find information? About checking sources and looking for proof." He'd been teaching her basic research skills for a school project, never imagining she'd turn those lessons toward investigating her mother's death. "What did you find?" Ruby's voice dropped to a whisper, her 8-year-old seriousness carrying weight that made Vincent's chest tight. "Daddy, there's something wrong with Mommy's accident. The dates don't match up." "What do you mean?" "The police said Mommy crashed on Monday night during the storm." "But look," Ruby showed him her phone screen, displaying a weather website. "There wasn't any storm that night. The big snowstorm was 3 days earlier. And look at this." She swiped to a social media page Vincent didn't recognize. The profile showed Lila's photo, but the name read Lily Manning. The most recent post was dated just 2 days ago after the supposed accident. Vincent's world tilted sideways. The careful control he'd maintained throughout the funeral service cracked, and beneath it, something dark and primal began to stir. He stared at the screen, his mind racing through implications and possibilities, each one more devastating than the last. Where did you find this? I remember the name Derek from when Mommy talked about her photography friend. So I looked him up, and I found this page in his friends list. Daddy, I think we need to leave. Now. Vincent's voice carried the command authority that had directed soldiers through life and death situations. Ruby nodded, understanding instinctively that something had shifted, that the game had changed in ways she was too young to fully comprehend. As they walked toward the cemetery, Vincent's mind was no longer on the funeral, the flowers, or the mourners offering their sympathies. Instead, he was analyzing, planning, calculating. The skills that had made him legendary in the military, that had built his security empire, that had kept dangerous people safe from even more dangerous threats. All of it focused now on a single, burning question. If Lila Torres was supposed to be dead, who exactly were they about to bury? Chapter 3. The Phone Revelation. The cemetery procession moved with somber dignity, but Vincent felt like he was walking through a nightmare. The mahogany casket, the pristine white flowers, the grieving faces, all of it suddenly seemed like an elaborate stage production, and he was the only one who didn't know he was watching a performance. Ruby walked beside him, her small hand clutching his with unusual intensity. She kept glancing at her phone, then at Derek Manning, who had positioned himself among the pallbearers with practiced solemnity. Vincent's daughter had always been observant, but today her attention was laser-focused in a way that reminded him uncomfortably of himself during reconnaissance missions. As Father Morrison began the graveside service, Vincent found himself studying the mourners with new eyes. Who else knew? Who else was part of whatever elaborate deception had convinced him his wife was dead? The thought of being manipulated, of having his grief weaponized against him, filled Vincent with a cold rage that threatened to overwhelm his carefully maintained composure. During my mother's funeral, my 8-year-old daughter grabbed my hand and whispered, "Dad, we need to leave. Now." The words cut through the priest's eulogy like a knife. Vincent looked down at Ruby, whose face had gone pale as she stared at her phone screen. I turned and asked, "Why?" She quietly pulled out her phone. "Look at this." Ruby's fingers trembled as she showed him the screen. It displayed a live video feed from what appeared to be a social media story. The timestamp showed it was posted just minutes ago. And there, very much alive and laughing in what looked like a tropical setting, was Lila Torres. She was wearing a red bikini Vincent had never seen before, her hair styled differently, her skin glowing with a tan she'd never had during their marriage. But it was unmistakably her. The woman they were supposedly burying was very clearly alive and seemingly happy somewhere thousands of miles away. In that moment, I froze. Vincent's world collapsed and rebuilt itself in the span of a heartbeat. The grief, the pain, the careful arrangements, all of it had been a lie. His wife hadn't died in a car accident. She had faked her own death, leaving him to mourn a ghost while she started a new life somewhere else. The fury that rose in Vincent's chest was unlike anything he'd experienced, even in the heat of combat. This wasn't just betrayal. It was psychological warfare waged against him by the one person he'd trusted completely. She had used his love for her as a weapon, had made him complicit in his own destruction. But the tactical part of his mind, the part that had kept him alive through impossible odds, was already working. If Lila was alive, if this was all an elaborate fake, then someone had to have died in that car crash. Someone had to be in the casket they were about to lower into the ground. And Derek Manning's positioning among the pallbearers suddenly took on a sinister significance. Vincent's gaze swept the crowd, looking for tells, for signs of guilt or knowledge. Most faces showed genuine grief, but a few, Derek's included, seemed to be performing rather than feeling. There was something calculated in the way Derek occasionally glanced at his watch, something rehearsed in his interactions with other mourners. Ruby tugged on his sleeve again, her voice barely audible. "Daddy, there's more." She swiped to another screen, this one showing a bank transfer notification from an account Vincent didn't recognize. The amount made his blood run cold. $2.3 million, transferred just that morning to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. It was nearly exactly the amount of Lila's life insurance policy. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just about leaving him. It was about stealing from him. They had killed someone, used that body to fake Lila's death, collected the insurance money, and left him to grieve while they lived luxuriously on his dime. Vincent's hands clenched into fists as Father Morrison asked the assembled mourners to bow their heads in final prayer. Instead, Vincent was memorizing faces, noting who seemed genuinely moved and who appeared to be counting down minutes until this charade ended. "We need to go," he whispered to Ruby, who nodded eagerly. As the service concluded and people began to disperse, Vincent and Ruby slipped away from the main group. Vincent's mind was already shifting into mission mode, the cold analytical thinking that had made him successful in military operations and private security. He had been played, manipulated by experts who had underestimated one crucial factor. Vincent Torres had spent his entire adult life hunting dangerous people, and now he was about to become the most dangerous person in Lila and Derek's world. They reached the car as the first spadefuls of dirt hit the casket. Vincent helped Ruby into her seat, his movements mechanical as his mind raced through possibilities and plans. "Daddy." Ruby's voice was small, uncertain. "Are you okay?" Vincent looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror. She had just helped him uncover a conspiracy that could have destroyed their lives, had shown courage and intelligence beyond her years. But she was still his 8-year-old little girl, and she deserved better than being caught in the crossfire of what was about to come. "I'm okay, sweetheart, but things are going to be different now." "Different how?" Vincent started the engine, his reflection in the windshield showing eyes that had gone flat and cold, the expression his enemies had learned to fear in the moments before he struck. "Mommy made some very bad choices, Ruby, and now Daddy has to fix things." As they drove away from the cemetery, Vincent was already planning. He had resources, connections, skills that Lila and Derek couldn't imagine. They had made one critical error in their perfect crime. They had left behind a man who specialized in making problems disappear. And Vincent Torres was about to show them exactly how good he was at his job. Chapter 4: The Hunter Awakens. Vincent's home office looked like a war room within 6 hours of leaving the cemetery. Maps, photos, bank records, and computer printouts covered every surface. His military training had taught him that successful operations required thorough intelligence gathering, and discovering your wife's fake death definitely qualified as an operation. Ruby sat cross-legged on the floor, her laptop open as she worked with the focused intensity she'd inherited from him. Vincent had initially hesitated to involve her, but Ruby had made it clear she wasn't stepping aside. "She lied to me too, Daddy," she'd said with 8-year-old logic that cut straight to the truth. "I want to help catch the bad guys." "Tell me about this social media profile again," Vincent said, studying the printouts Ruby had made. "It's not listed under Mommy's real name," Ruby explained, pointing to the screen. "But look at the metadata on the photos. They were all taken with the same phone model Mommy has, and if you enhance this reflection in her sunglasses, you can see part of a hotel name." Vincent smiled grimly. His daughter was displaying investigative skills that would impress his professional contacts. "Good work. What else?" "The location tags are disabled, but there's a pattern in the backgrounds. Palm trees, white sand, that specific shade of blue water. I think they're in the Caribbean. Maybe the Bahamas or Turks and Caicos." While Ruby continued her digital archaeology, Vincent was making calls to contacts from his military and security days. The network of favors, information, and mutual assistance that existed among former special operations personnel was vast and largely invisible to civilians. Within 2 hours, he had confirmation that Derek Manning had booked flights to Nassau 3 days before Lila's supposed accident. But the most interesting information came from Tommy Restrepo, a former Delta Force medic who now worked in forensic consultation. "Vince, you're not going to like this," Tommy said over the encrypted call. "I pulled some strings and got a look at the accident report. The body they found? Dental records were a match for your wife, but that's because they only found fragments. The fire was so hot it basically cremated everything. Someone could have planted dental fragments? If they knew what they were doing, absolutely. And here's the kicker. The blood samples they used for DNA comparison? They came from your wife's doctor's office. Recent blood work from her annual physical. Vincent's jaw clenched. This wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. It was a sophisticated, long-term plan. They had been setting up this deception for months, collecting DNA samples, establishing alibis, creating false identities. Tommy, I need to know who died in that car. Already working on it. Give me 24 hours. After ending the call, Vincent turned to find Ruby watching him with the too serious expression that reminded him she was far more perceptive than most adults gave her credit for. Daddy, what are we going to do when we find them? The question hung in the air between them. Vincent had spent his adult life operating in worlds where justice wasn't always served by courts and legal systems. He'd eliminated threats that endangered innocent people, had made hard choices in service of the greater good. But this was personal in a way that made those previous missions seem abstract. We're going to make sure they can never hurt anyone else the way they hurt us, he said finally. Ruby nodded, accepting this with a matter-of-fact way children processed difficult truths. Are we going to tell the police? Eventually. But first, we need to gather all the evidence. We need to understand exactly what they did and how they did it. What Vincent didn't tell his daughter was that the evidence gathering served a dual purpose. Yes, they would need proof for the authorities. But more importantly, Vincent needed to understand every detail of Lila and Derek's plan so he could construct something far more devastating in return. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw you at the service today. Lila would be so proud of how strong you're being. A friend. Vincent showed the message to Ruby, who immediately began tracing the number. Burner phone, she announced after a few minutes. But it was activated at a store in Miami yesterday. Miami, close to the Caribbean, perfect for island hopping. Vincent felt the familiar cold satisfaction of pieces falling into place. Another text arrived. The insurance money should help you and Ruby start fresh. Sometimes the dead can be more generous than the living. This time, Vincent's smile was razor-sharp. They were taunting him, convinced they had executed the perfect crime. They thought they were dealing with a grieving widower who would take his insurance payout and fade into quiet suburban obscurity. They had no idea they had just awakened something far more dangerous than they could imagine. Ruby, I need you to do something for me, Vincent said, his voice carrying the calm authority she recognized from his serious moments. I want you to keep tracking everything you can find about Mommy and Derek online. But I also want you to start packing a bag. Are we going somewhere? Soon. Very soon. Vincent looked at the wall map where he'd been marking locations, times, and connections. Tommy would have the identity of the real victim within hours. His contacts in the islands would pinpoint Lila and Derek's exact location by tomorrow. And then Vincent Torres would remind the world why certain people had learned to fear him in the darkness between nations. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in 3 years. Carlos, it's Vince Torres. I need a favor, and I need it off the books. The voice on the other end was gravelly but warm. Vince, heard about Lila, man. I'm sorry for your loss. Actually, Carlos, that's what I'm calling about. Turns out my wife isn't as dead as everyone thinks she is. There was a pause, then a low whistle. Oh, brother, what do you need? Everything you've got on identity theft, document fraud, and offshore banking. And Carlos? This one's personal. Vincent Torres had spent years protecting other people from the monsters that lurked in the shadows of civilized society. Now it was time to remind his wife and her lover that sometimes the greatest monster was the one you invited into your home. Chapter 5. The Web Unravels. Tommy Restrepo's call came at 3 a.m., which told Vincent everything he needed to know about how disturbing the information was. Former Special Ops personnel only called at those hours when the news couldn't wait for daylight. Vince, you sitting down? Just tell me. The body in your wife's car belonged to Isabella Santos, 26 years old, reported missing from Tampa 6 weeks ago. Worked at a dental clinic. Vincent's blood ran cold. The same clinic where your wife had her dental work done last year. Yeah. This Isabella had access to dental records, x-rays, everything needed to fake the identification. The police think she was selling information to identity thieves, but I think she got in over her head. They killed her for her silence. Looks that way. And Vince? She had a 3-year-old daughter. The kid's been in foster care since Isabella disappeared. The revelation hit Vincent like a physical blow. This wasn't just about stealing from him. They had murdered a young mother and orphaned a child. Isabella Santos had probably thought she was participating in some minor insurance fraud, never realizing she was signing her own death warrant. Vincent looked across his office to where Ruby was sleeping on the couch, surrounded by printed photos and evidence. His daughter had worked until midnight, driven by the same relentless focus that characterized everything she inherited from him. She deserved to know her mother was alive, but she also deserved justice for Isabella Santos. Tommy, I need everything you can find on this woman. Background, connections, how she met Derek and Lila. Already on it. But Vince? There's more. I ran Derek Manning through the system, and this isn't his first time at this particular rodeo. Vincent's grip tightened on the phone. Explain. Derek Manning married a wealthy widow in Phoenix 3 years ago. Caroline Hutchins inherited $2 million from her first husband's construction business. 6 months after the wedding, Caroline died in a hiking accident. Derek collected a nice insurance payout and disappeared. Son of a bitch. Gets better. Before Caroline, there was Margaret Chin in Portland. Different last name then, he was Derek Walsh. Similar pattern. Whirlwind romance, quick marriage, suspicious accident, insurance money, and Derek vanishing into thin air. Vincent was already moving, pulling files and making notes. He's a professional black widower. Bingo. And your wife wasn't his mark. She was his partner. The social media profiles Ruby found? They go back 8 months, which means Lila was planning this long before she ever mentioned that photography class. The pieces were forming a picture that made Vincent's jaw clench with rage. Lila hadn't just betrayed their marriage. She had become part of a conspiracy that murdered innocent women for money. The woman he'd loved, the mother of his child, was a serial killer. There's one more thing, Tommy continued. Derek's got a boat registered in Nassau. 40-foot cabin cruiser called New Horizons. Perfect for moving between islands without leaving paper trails. Vincent smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Tommy, you're worth every favor I owe you. What's your play here, Vince? Because if you're thinking about going down there yourself, I'm thinking about a lot of things. None of them involve calling the FBI and hoping they can extradite 2 murderers from a non-extradition country. Tommy was quiet for a moment. You need backup, you call me. Some things are too big for one man, even someone like you. After ending the call, Vincent sat in the darkness of his office, processing the magnitude of what he'd discovered. This wasn't just personal betrayal. It was a criminal enterprise that had claimed multiple lives. Isabella Santos, Caroline Hutchins, Margaret Chun, and God knew how many others. The legal system would take years to sort through jurisdictional issues, extradition treaties, and international banking regulations. By then, Lila and Derek would have disappeared into new identities, ready to claim new victims. Vincent had never been particularly patient with legal systems anyway. His secure laptop chimed with an encrypted message from Carlos, his contact in maritime security. The message contained boat registration records, harbor surveillance photos, and most importantly, confirmation that New Horizons was currently docked at Paradise Island Marina in Nassau. The photos showed Derek and a woman who was unmistakably Lila, though her hair was now platinum blonde and styled completely differently. They looked relaxed, happy, triumphant. In one image, Derek was raising a champagne glass in what appeared to be a toast, celebrating their successful murder and theft, no doubt. Vincent's phone buzzed with another taunting text. Hope you're sleeping well, knowing Lila is finally at peace. Some people are just meant for better things. This time, Vincent typed back, enjoyed the champagne celebration. Paradise Island looks beautiful this time of year. His phone remained silent for nearly an hour. "Then who is this?" Vincent smiled and typed, "Someone who knows exactly what you did to Isabella Santos." No response came, but Vincent didn't need one. He just fired the first shot across their bow, letting them know their perfect crime had been exposed. Now they would scramble, make mistakes, reveal vulnerabilities he could exploit. Ruby stirred on the couch, blinking awake in the dim light from his computer screen. "Daddy, did you find something?" "I found everything, sweetheart. And tomorrow we're going to start making the bad people pay for what they did." Ruby sat up, instantly alert. "Are we going to the island?" Vincent looked at his daughter, seeing the steel in her eyes that matched his own. Ruby had lost her innocence to this conspiracy, had been forced to grow up too fast because of her mother's choices. But she had also proven herself to be remarkably capable, and Vincent was beginning to think their enemies had severely underestimated the Torres family. "We're going to do something better than that," Vincent said. "We're going to bring the island to them." As dawn broke over the Texas horizon, Vincent Torres began planning an operation that would demonstrate why some people should never have awakened the sleeping wolf they thought they had safely caged. Chapter 6: The Trap Sets. Vincent's plan took shape over 3 days of meticulous preparation, the kind of methodical approach that had made him legendary in military circles. Unlike his enemies, who had relied on deception and misdirection, Vincent's strategy was built on superior intelligence, overwhelming force, and the tactical advantage of fighting on terrain of his choosing. The key insight had come from Ruby, who pointed out something Vincent's professional training had initially overlooked. "Daddy, they think you're sad and broken," she said while reviewing the surveillance photos. "But what if we made them think you were something else instead?" "Like what?" "Like someone they should be scared of." Vincent had spent 48 hours establishing a new digital presence for himself, one that Derek and Lila would inevitably discover if they investigated their newly aware victim. Public records now showed Vincent Torres as the CEO of multiple offshore security companies, with contracts for asset recovery and problem resolution in countries that didn't ask too many questions. Professional forums contained references to his work in extreme extraction scenarios and permanent threat neutralization. None of it was technically false. Vincent's legitimate security business had indeed handled sensitive international work, and his military record spoke for itself. But the new presentation painted a picture of someone far more dangerous than a grieving widower, someone who specialized in making problems disappear permanently. The beauty of this approach, Vincent explained to Ruby as they reviewed boat schedules and flight manifests, is that they'll start making defensive moves instead of offensive ones. When people get scared, they make mistakes. Ruby had proven invaluable in the intelligence gathering phase. Her seemingly innocent requests for help with school projects had generated detailed information from teachers, neighbors, and family friends about Lila's activities in the months before her disappearance. The picture that emerged was of a woman who had been systematically distancing herself from their life, liquidating assets, and creating alibis. "Mrs. Henderson says Mommy asked her lots of questions about travel," Ruby reported after a carefully orchestrated conversation with their neighbor. "She wanted to know about places that don't have extradition treaties and how to open bank accounts without leaving paper trails." Vincent's contacts in the intelligence community had confirmed the worst of his suspicions. Lila's photography class had been a cover for meeting Derek, but Derek himself was part of a larger network of marriage and murder specialists. At least 6 other wealthy widowers had died under suspicious circumstances across the Southeast over the past 5 years, all connected to men who used similar methods to Derek's approach. The revelation that his wife wasn't just a betrayer, but an active serial killer had crystallized Vincent's resolve. This wasn't about recovering stolen money or punishing infidelity. This was about stopping predators who viewed human life as a commodity to be harvested. Tommy's follow-up investigation had revealed the full scope of their operation. Isabella Santos had been recruited through her job at the dental clinic, initially just to provide dental records for fake IDs. But when she'd grown suspicious and started asking questions, Derek had convinced her to meet him at a remote location. The medical examiner's private notes, which Tommy accessed through professional channels, indicated she'd been drugged before the car crash that provided her body for Lila's fake death. She died scared and alone, Vincent told Ruby as they studied Isabella's photo. And her little girl is growing up without a mommy because these people wanted our money. Ruby's jaw set in an expression that reminded Vincent powerfully of himself. They have to pay for that. Vincent's phone had been quiet for 2 days since his first text exchange with Derek, which meant they were likely planning their next move. Professional killers didn't simply disappear when confronted. They eliminated threats. Derek and Lila would be assessing whether Vincent represented enough of a danger to require permanent silencing. The answer Vincent planned to give them was unequivocally yes. Carlos had provided maritime intelligence indicating that New Horizons had left Nassau and was moving between various Bahamian islands, probably trying to establish alibis and create confusion about their location. But Derek's ego had provided Vincent with an unexpected advantage. The boat's GPS beacon was still actively transmitting to a tracking service, probably because Derek enjoyed the prestige of being monitored by international maritime security. Pride goeth before destruction, Vincent murmured, watching the boat's real-time location on his screen. What's that, Daddy? Something your grandmother used to say. It means that when people get too proud, they make mistakes that hurt them. Vincent's own mistake had been trusting completely, loving without reservation. But that mistake had also given him something his enemies lacked: absolute moral clarity about what needed to be done. His secure phone rang with a call from an unlisted international number. Vincent Torres? The voice was Derek's, but tighter and more controlled than the casual charm Vincent remembered from social encounters. Derek, how's the weather in paradise? We need to talk. I'm listening. You don't understand what you're interfering with. This is bigger than you think, and if you keep pushing, you're going to get hurt. Vincent's smile was cold enough to frost windows. Derek, I've been hurt. My wife faked her death, stole my money, and helped murder an innocent woman. The question isn't whether I'll get hurt. It's whether you understand what you've awakened. Vincent, let me save you some time with the threats and negotiations. I know about Isabella Santos. I know about Caroline Hutchins. I know about Margaret Shun. I know exactly what kind of operation you're running, and I know you made one critical error in judgment. What's that? You thought I was just another Mark. But I'm not a lonely widower looking for love, Derek. I'm the kind of person parents hire to get their kidnapped children back from places where governments can't reach. I'm the kind of person who makes problems disappear so thoroughly that they never existed in the first place. The silence on the other end stretched for nearly 30 seconds. What do you want? Derek finally asked. Vincent looked at Ruby, who was watching him with proud intensity. I want you to remember that feeling you have right now. That cold fear in your chest. That knowledge that you've made a terrible mistake. I want you to hold on to that feeling, because it's the last mercy you're going to receive from me. Vincent ended the call and immediately powered down the phone. Let them chew on that for a while. When are we going to get them? Ruby asked. Soon, sweetheart. Very soon. But first, Vincent had one more piece of the trap to set in motion. He picked up his secure landline and dialed a number in Langley, Virginia. Morrison. Jim, it's Vince Torres. I need to cash in that favor you owe me. Jesus, Vince, I heard about Lila. I'm sorry, man. Save the sympathy, Jim. Turns out she's not as dead as advertised, and she's part of a serial murder operation targeting wealthy men. I'm going to need some unofficial assistance bringing her home. There was a pause. Vince, you know I can't authorize anything. I'm not asking for authorization. I'm asking for a blind eye and a clean extraction route when the job is done. Another pause, longer this time. What kind of timeline are we talking about? Vincent looked at the tracking data, showing Derek's boat moving toward Grand Bahama Island, probably seeking the protection of better developed infrastructure and security. 72 hours. I'll make some calls. But Vince? This conversation never happened. What conversation? As Vincent hung up the phone, he felt the familiar cold focus settling over him. The mental state that had carried him through the most dangerous operations of his military career. Derek and Lila thought they were dealing with a civilian, a victim who would eventually be intimidated into silence or eliminated as a liability. They were about to learn that some civilians were far more dangerous than any enemy they'd ever faced. Chapter 7. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. Vincent and Ruby arrived in Nassau on a commercial flight, traveling under identities that would hold up to casual scrutiny but weren't meant for extended operations. Vincent's cover as a maritime insurance investigator gave him legitimate reasons to ask questions about boat rentals, harbor security, and recent vessel movements. Ruby, ostensibly his daughter, accompanying him on a business trip, had proven remarkably effective at gathering information from hotel staff and marina workers who were charmed by her precocious intelligence. The Atlantis Paradise Island Resort buzzed with the kind of wealthy tourists who wouldn't look twice at a successful businessman and his well-dressed daughter. Vincent had chosen their base of operations carefully, close enough to Derek's boat to maintain surveillance, visible enough to ensure Derek and Lila would know he'd arrived, isolated enough to provide multiple escape routes when the situation escalated. Because Vincent was absolutely certain it would escalate. "Daddy, the boat moved again," Ruby announced, studying her tablet from their Ocean View suite. She'd become expert at tracking new horizons through maritime traffic websites and social media posts from other boaters who photographed the expensive yacht. "Where to this time?" "Compass Cay. It's about 60 miles southeast of here. Very remote. Mostly uninhabited except for the swimming pigs." Vincent nodded, studying nautical charts spread across the suite's dining table. Compass Cay was perfect for Derek's purposes, isolated enough for private conversations, popular enough with day trip tourists that additional boats wouldn't attract attention. It was also, Vincent noted with grim satisfaction, completely outside of Bahamian police jurisdiction and far enough for Nassau that any incidents would take hours to investigate. His secure phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "You should have stayed home." Vincent typed back, "Where's the fun in that?" The response came quickly. "This isn't a game, Vincent. You're in over your head." "Derek, I've been in over my head in places you can't even pronounce. The difference is I always swim to the surface." Vincent's phone immediately rang. Derek's voice was tight with controlled anger. "You think you're some kind of action hero? This isn't Afghanistan, and you're not hunting terrorists. This is real life with real consequences." "You're right about the consequences part," Vincent replied calmly. "Isabella Santos found that out. So did Caroline Hutchins and Margaret Chun. The question is whether you've thought through the consequences of threatening a man whose job description includes making problems disappear." "Vincent, let me ask you something, Derek. In all your research on me, did you bother to find out what I did before I started my security company?" Silence. "I hunted people, Derek. People who thought they were untouchable, who hid behind borders and governments and money. I found them anyway, and I brought them home. Sometimes alive, sometimes not, depending on what they'd done and who they'd hurt." Vincent's voice dropped to the conversational tone he'd used during interrogations. Calm and reasonable and absolutely terrifying to anyone who understood what lay beneath it. Isabella Santos was 26 years old. She had a 3-year-old daughter who's now in foster care because mommy went missing. Caroline Hutchins had grandchildren who still don't understand why grandma died on that hiking trail. Margaret Chin's parents flew her body back to Hong Kong for burial, and they still think it was a tragic accident. "Vincent, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You and my wife are predators who view human life as a renewable resource. The only question now is whether I kill you quickly or slowly." Vincent ended the call and looked at Ruby, who was watching him with the serious attention she gave to important lessons. "Daddy, are you really going to kill them?" The question deserved an honest answer. "Yes, sweetheart. They're bad people who hurt innocent families, and they won't stop unless someone makes them stop." Ruby nodded, processing this with 8-year-old pragmatism. "Will we get in trouble?" "Not if we're smart about it." Vincent's phone buzzed with another text. "We have a proposal. Mia's tomorrow at Compass Cay noon. Come alone and unarmed. We can work something out." Vincent showed the message to Ruby, who immediately began pulling up information about Compass Cay on her tablet. "It's a trap," she announced after reviewing satellite images and tourist websites. "Of course it's a trap. The question is who's trapping whom." Vincent's own research had revealed that Compass Cay was indeed perfect for an ambush, dozens of hidden coves, thick vegetation, multiple escape routes by water. Derek and Lila probably planned to eliminate him there and dispose of his body in deep water, then disappear to another island chain before anyone noticed he was missing. They had made one critical error in their planning. They assumed Vincent would come alone. Tommy Restrepo's voice crackled through the encrypted satellite phone that evening. "Vince, I'm 30 minutes out with a full tactical package. You sure about this?" "I'm sure. They killed 4 people we know about, probably more. And they orphaned Isabella Santos's little girl. This ends tomorrow." "Roger that. What's the play?" Vincent outlined his plan while Ruby listened, occasionally offering tactical suggestions that impressed even Tommy's experienced judgment. The operation would be swift, decisive, and completely outside any legal framework that might allow Derek and Lila to escape justice through technicalities or jurisdictional disputes. "One more thing, Tommy. There's a 3-year-old girl in Tampa who needs a family. When this is over, I want to make sure she gets the best possible placement. Consider it done." As Vincent tucked Ruby into bed that night, she asked the question he'd been expecting. "Daddy, what about Mommy? I know she did bad things, but she's still my mommy." Vincent sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. "Your mommy made choices that hurt a lot of people, including us. And sometimes when people make really bad choices, they have to face really serious consequences. Even mommies? Especially people who are supposed to protect children, but choose to hurt them instead." Ruby was quiet for a long moment. "I understand, but it still makes me sad." "It makes me sad too, sweetheart. But some things are more important than being sad. Like making sure the bad people can't hurt anyone else." Exactly like that. As Ruby drifted off to sleep, Vincent stood on their suite's balcony, looking out over the dark Caribbean waters. Tomorrow would bring violence and finality, the kind of justice that courts couldn't deliver and governments wouldn't pursue. Vincent Torres had spent his career protecting innocent people from predators. Tomorrow, he would remind the world why predators had learned to fear the darkness where he operated. The hunt was almost over. Chapter 8: Blood in Paradise. The morning sun painted Compass Cay in deceptively peaceful pastels as Vincent approached the rendezvous point in a rented speedboat. To any observer, he appeared to be exactly what Derek and Lila expected, a lone man coming to negotiate with his wife's killers. The boat's GPS showed Vincent following the designated route. His phone transmitted the proper location signals, and surveillance from Derek's position would confirm he was apparently alone and unarmed. What Derek couldn't see was Tommy Restrepo and 2 other former Special Operations personnel already in position on the island's eastern shore, or the combat equipment hidden beneath Vincent's casual tourist clothing. What Derek definitely couldn't detect was Ruby Torres, positioned 300 yards offshore in his second boat with a high-powered spotting scope and encrypted radio equipment. "Overwatch in position." Ruby's voice crackled through Vincent's earpiece. "Target vessel confirmed at the North Cove. 2 heat signatures visible on deck." Vincent smiled grimly. His daughter had insisted on participating in the operation's intelligence phase, and her natural aptitude for reconnaissance work was proving invaluable. She'd spotted Derek's boat 45 minutes before Vincent's scheduled arrival, noting that it was positioned to provide covering fire for anyone on the beach while blocking the most obvious escape route. "Roger, Overwatch." Approaching primary landing zone, Vincent beached his boat on the white sand of Compass Cay's main tourist area, a stretch of beach normally populated by day trippers coming to swim with the island's famous pigs. Today, the beach was empty except for Lila Torres, who stood near the waterline in a flowing white dress that made her look like a grieving widow rather than a serial killer. She was beautiful, Vincent noted with clinical detachment. The tropical sun had bronzed her skin. Her blonde hair caught the morning light, and her smile carried the same warmth that had once made him believe he was the luckiest man alive. Now that smile looked practiced, calculated, the expression of a predator who had perfected the art of appearing vulnerable. "Hello, Vincent." Her voice carried just the right note of sadness and regret. "I'm sorry it came to this." Vincent approached slowly, his hands visible and empty, playing the role of the confused husband seeking answers. "Are you? Sorry, I mean. Or are you sorry you got caught?" Lila's smile faltered slightly. I never wanted to hurt you. Or Ruby. This was supposed to be clean, quick. You were supposed to grieve and move on. With Isabella Santos's blood on your hands. That was Derek's idea. I wanted to use a body from a morgue, but Derek said it needed to be fresh for the DNA evidence to work. Vincent felt his anger spike at the casual way she discussed murdering an innocent woman, but he forced his voice to remain conversational. So you killed her for convenience. We did what was necessary. Lila's mask was slipping, revealing something cold and reptilian underneath. Isabella was already stealing from the clinic. She was already a criminal. She was a 26-year-old mother. She was a tool that served its purpose. Vincent's earpiece crackled. Sniper team, target acquired on boat. Clear shot when ready. Vincent subvocalized his response. Hold. Need both targets confirmed. Derek Manning emerged from the vegetation behind Lila, and Vincent noted immediately that he was armed. A pistol hung loosely in his right hand, positioned to look casual but ready for immediate use. Derek's smile was different from Lila's. Less practiced warmth, more predatory satisfaction. Vincent fucking Torres, Derek said, his voice carrying mock camaraderie. The legendary soldier boy who couldn't protect his own wife from seduction. Actually, Derek, I'm starting to think I was protecting her from you. Derek's laugh was genuine this time. Oh, that's rich. You think sweet little Lila was corrupted by the big bad Derek? Vincent, your wife approached me. She'd been planning this for 2 years before we ever met. Vincent looked at Lila, whose expression had shifted to something closer to her true nature. The warmth was completely gone now, replaced by the calculating coldness of someone who viewed other people as resources to be exploited. 2 years, Vincent asked. Since Ruby started school, Lila confirmed. I realized I was going to be stuck in suburban hell forever unless I did something about it. Derek just happened to have the expertise I needed. The expertise to commit murder. Derek shrugged. I prefer to think of it as problem solving. Wealthy older men die in accidents all the time. Grieving widows collect insurance money and move on with their lives. It's a service, really. We give people the freedom to pursue their true desires instead of being trapped by societal expectations. Vincent's earpiece crackled. Alpha team in position. Tango 2 has explosive device. Appears to be backup plan for eliminating primary target. Vincent's blood chilled. Derek wasn't just armed. He was prepared to eliminate all evidence of this meeting, probably including Lila, if she became a liability. The thing is, Vincent, Derek continued, raising his pistol to a more threatening position. You've become a problem that needs solving. You know too much, you've involved too many people, and frankly, you're starting to piss me off. You're going to kill me like you killed Isabella. Actually, that's where you're wrong. Derek's smile turned genuinely nasty. Isabella died quickly because she was just business. You've made this personal, so you're going to die very, very slowly. But first, you're going to watch what happens to your precious daughter. Vincent's world went red around the edges. Ruby's not here. Oh, but she is. Lila pulled out a pair of binoculars and pointed toward the water. Sweet little Ruby, sitting in a boat with a pair of binoculars, thinking she's helping Daddy with his spy games. Derek's associate is moving into position right now. Vincent's earpiece erupted with Ruby's voice. Daddy, there's another boat coming fast. They have guns. In that moment, Vincent Torres stopped being a father seeking justice and became the predator that had earned his reputation in the world's darkest corners. Alpha Team, weapons free. Overwatch, emergency extraction. All targets are now hostile. Vincent moved as Derek tried to bring his weapon to bear, but Vincent had spent 20 years training for moments when talking ended and killing began. His hidden knife appeared in his hand and found Derek's throat before the other man could complete his draw. Derek gurgled and fell, his blood painting the white sand as Lila screamed and started running toward the tree line. Vincent's earpiece filled with gunfire as Tommy's team engaged the boat, moving toward Ruby's position. Overwatch, status. I'm okay, Daddy. The bad guy's boat is sinking. Vincent sprinted after Lila, who was faster than he'd expected, but not faster than someone who had spent his career chasing targets through hostile terrain. He tackled her 20 yards from the water's edge, both of them rolling in the sand as she clawed at his face and screamed curses that would have made his old drill sergeants proud. "You killed her," Lila shrieked, her composure completely shattered. "Isabella was my idea. She trusted me, and I handed her over to Derek because I knew he'd enjoy killing her slowly." Vincent's hands found Lila's throat, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them and the choice between justice and revenge. "Vincent," Tommy's voice in his earpiece was calm, professional. "Clean extraction in 30 seconds. What's your call?" Vincent looked down at the woman who had been his wife, the mother of his child, the person he'd loved most in the world. She stared back at him with pure hatred, her mask finally completely discarded. "Vincent," she wheezed, "you can't do this. Ruby needs her mother. Ruby needs to know that monsters face consequences." Vincent's hands tightened, and Lila Torres died in the same paradise where she'd planned to spend the money earned from murdering innocent people. Alpha Team, all clear. Extraction complete. As Vincent walked back toward his boat, he felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Justice had been served, and the world was safer without Derek Manning and Lila Torres hunting innocent victims. But more importantly, Isabella Santos could rest in peace, and her daughter would grow up knowing that the people who killed her mother had paid the ultimate price. Chapter 9. The Price of Justice. 3 months later, Vincent Torres sat in his home office, reviewing the final reports on the Compass K operation. Officially, Derek Manning and Lila Torres had died in a boating accident while fleeing Bahamian waters after their insurance fraud was discovered. The explosion that destroyed their boat had been attributed to fuel system failure, a tragically common occurrence among inexperienced pleasure boaters who cut corners on maintenance. The official story held up to scrutiny because Vincent's contacts had ensured it would. Bodies lost at sea, no surviving witnesses, and a convenient paper trail showing Derek and Lila's increasing desperation as law enforcement closed in on their operation. The insurance companies were satisfied. The Bahamian authorities considered the case closed, and Isabella Santos's murder was officially solved with her killers listed as deceased. Ruby entered his office carrying a photo album, her expression more serious than any 8-year-old should have to be. She'd grown up considerably over the past few months, forced to confront truths about her mother that most adults would struggle to process. "I finished organizing the pictures," she announced, setting the album on his desk. "I kept the good ones of Mommy from before she became bad, but I threw away all the ones with Derek in them." Vincent opened the album and found himself looking at carefully curated memories. Family vacations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. Ruby had preserved the illusion of their happy family while systematically removing any evidence of the deception that had poisoned their lives. "This is good work, sweetheart. How do you feel about it?" Ruby climbed into his lap, a gesture she'd been making more frequently since returning from the Bahamas. "I feel sad that Mommy chose to be bad, but I'm not sad that the bad people can't hurt anyone else." Vincent hugged his daughter, marveling at her resilience and wisdom. Ruby had seen things no child should see, had participated in events that would traumatize most adults. But she'd also learned lessons about justice, loyalty, and the price of betrayal that would serve her well throughout her life. "Ruby, do you ever think about what we did? Do you feel bad about it?" She considered the question with the serious attention she gave to all important matters. "Daddy, bad people hurt good people because they think they can get away with it. When good people show them they can't get away with it, fewer bad people try to hurt good people. That's math, not feelings." Vincent smiled, recognizing his own pragmatic worldview reflected in his daughter's reasoning. Ruby Torres would never be a victim. She'd learned too early and too well that the world contained predators, and that sometimes the only way to stop them was through violence. His secure phone buzzed with a call from Tommy Restrepo. "Vince, got some news you'll want to hear. Remember that list of Derek's previous victims we put together? Caroline Hutchins, Margaret Shunn, and the others. What about them?" Turns out Derek kept detailed records of all his operations. Very detailed. The FBI found his storage unit in Phoenix, and it's like Christmas morning for cold case investigators across 6 states. Vincent felt a grim satisfaction. Derek's professional pride had provided a final service. ensuring that all his victims' families would finally have answers about what had happened to their loved ones. "There's more," Tommy continued. "The evidence tied Derek and Lila to at least 12 murders over the past 5 years. The insurance payouts alone totaled over $15 million. They weren't just serial killers, Vince. They were one of the most successful criminal partnerships in modern history. Until they made the mistake of targeting the wrong family." "Exactly. Oh, and that little girl, Isabella's daughter? The adoption went through. She's living with a great family in Tampa, and they've been told her mother died a hero helping to stop dangerous criminals." Vincent closed his eyes, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. Isabella Santos's daughter would grow up knowing her mother had been brave, not just a victim. Sometimes the truth was less important than giving people the story they needed to heal. After ending the call, Vincent found Ruby setting up a chessboard on his desk. "Want to play, Daddy?" "Always." As they played, Vincent reflected on the choices that had brought them to this point. He'd killed his wife and her lover, had orchestrated events that resulted in multiple deaths, had operated completely outside legal boundaries in pursuit of what he considered justice. By any conventional moral standard, he was a murderer. But by his own standards, the ones forged in military service and tempered by years of protecting innocent people from predators, he'd simply done what needed to be done. Ruby captured his bishop with her knight, a move he hadn't seen coming. "Checkmate in 3 moves," she announced with quiet confidence. Vincent studied the board and realized she was right. His daughter had become formidable at chess over the past few months, approaching the game with the same tactical thinking that had made her invaluable during their operation against Derek and Lila. "Well played. You're getting scary good at this. You taught me that the most important thing is to think ahead and never let your enemies see your real plan until it's too late to stop." Vincent smiled. Ruby Torres was going to be a force to be reckoned with as she grew older. Any future predator who tried to target his family would discover that the apple hadn't fallen far from the tree. His personal phone chimed with a text from his brother Miguel. Heard through the grapevine that Lila's life insurance finally paid out. "You and Ruby doing okay?" Vincent typed back, "We're exactly where we need to be." It was true. The insurance money would ensure Ruby's future was secure. But more importantly, they'd both learned lessons about loyalty, justice, and the price of betrayal that money couldn't buy. Vincent had discovered that his daughter was capable of remarkable courage and wisdom, while Ruby had learned that her father would go to any lengths to protect her and ensure justice was served. Vincent Torres had spent his career hunting dangerous people in service of others. Now he'd hunted dangerous people in service of his family, and the world was better for their absence. As Ruby reset the chessboard for another game, Vincent felt something he hadn't experienced in years: complete peace with his choices. Derek Manning and Lila Torres had learned the hard way that some people should never be betrayed, some crimes could never be forgiven, and some wolves are far more dangerous when you threaten their pack. The game was over, and Vincent Torres had won. "Ready for another round, Daddy?" "Always, sweetheart. Always." In the end, that's all that mattered. Protecting the people who mattered most, and ensuring that those who threatened them face consequences they would never forget. Vincent Torres asked for nothing more than that, and he would never settle for anything less. The wolves were still hunting, but now they hunted together. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.